What up, Hoof listeners? Welcome back to another episode of the Hoof Podcast as we get you ready for the official offseason that starts today. Right, it's officially the offseason in the NFL. Teams can now apply the franchise tags. We're about 3 weeks away from the legal tampering period. Kind of kicks off free agency on March 11th. Free agency officially starts March 13th. So we're about 3 weeks out.
Yeah.
So
It's going to be exciting times. It moves fast, man. Just like the in season, it's the Super Bowl, and then we all get depressed for a while with no football, and before we know it, there's action happening because the whole off season is active pretty much. So we'll see that movement starting in March, and it's already time to start preparing.
Yeah, time to start preparing. But also, it's hope season, right? We're one
That's
player
right.
away from beating the Chiefs in the playoffs, and that starts today. So we'll be talking about it all off season. I'm going to break down the team needs today. We'll be getting into free agent targets. We'll be getting into NFL draft targets coming up in April. So be sure to tune in with us as we go through the process. First things first, the Bills' projected cap space is negative 51.2 million.
Yeah.
Not a great way to start out the offseason.
Precisely. Yeah. I mean, obviously there's a lot of moves to be made to make that a positive number. And I've heard, two things. Recently there was news that came out that the salary cap could potentially be about $8 to $10 million more than what is expected. So I think it was supposed to be around 241. It might be up to 250 even. So if it gets closer, great. That's good news for the Bills, obviously, because we have a lot of movement to make.
Yes.
But at the same time,
Swift, the extra $8 million per team.
Yeah, right. That was $600 million. But also just restructuring alone, and people who know the salary cap better than I do have, worked the numbers and the salary, the contract restructures, all of those things that can happen, can free up and give the Bills up to, I've seen, around 30 million if they do a lot of the moves that they can do. And that is definitely a good place to be. Still not a lot of money to play with. It's not like we're expecting to sign any huge free agents here this year. It's going to be more of the same: bargain bin, fill the positions in need, do what you got to do to make an active roster, basically, and depend on the draft. But still, that's a huge move to go from minus 50 to 30. I mean, there's
Huge.
a lot of work for Brandon Beane to get on, right? That's for sure.
So what goes into that? I mean, you know a lot about the cap. You always read about it. We've been lucky enough to associate ourselves with some experts in the past. Who we have to restructure Diggs, restructure Josh Allen. They both have to agree to that, right? So it's basically accounting, either paying more money up front to free up money in the future. What are the repercussions of that?
It's the same with any
can down the road a little bit.
Correct. It has to be. You always start with the players you're comfortable with keeping around, right? So Josh Allen's contract, let's use even numbers to make it easier, right? Let's say he's due this year $50 million against the cap, right? He's not, but we'll say that, right? He's $50 million against the cap this year. Well, how can the team rework that to make it less against the cap? What you do is you make it a prorated bonus, right? So you turn it into $40 million. We're going to pay you right up front, right? And $10 million is going to go against the cap. So the Bills write him a $40 million check. $10 million goes against the cap. That $40 million doesn't just disappear. It gets spread out over the remainder of the contract. So now, let's say there were 5 years remaining or 4 years remaining. You took off $40 million. That's going to go 10, 10, 10, 10. So this year now he would only count 20 million, but it's 10 million the next year, 10 million the next year, 10 million the next year.
Right.
As
that's
part of the bonus.
10 million less you have in the future.
Right.
Whereas if you paid it up front, you'd have more cap space in the future.
Same thing applies if you're extending a player, right? And you give them that bonus, whatever you give them as the bonus, say it's a $25 million contract, you give them a $20 million bonus and $5 million for that cap year. $5 million goes against the cap year. That 20 goes against however many years you gave them, 4 years. So that'd be an extra $5 million a year, right? So it's a way of deferring that money. Players like it, right? It's not like they're giving anything up. In fact, they're getting their money up front instead. Right. Here's this lump sum right away, right? Yeah. And then there's, the more conversational restructures that are rarer in many occasions, but I think the Bills do have opportunities for this with guys like Naheem Hines, for example, right? I think his cap number is around 6 million or something, or maybe even more than that. The Bills aren't going to pay him that, right? So they might approach him and say, let's rework this deal and do something to give you a guarantee, right? We'll give you the 2.5 million, but you're not worth 6 million and nobody's going to give you that. So we'll turn it into a 3-year contract with 2 void years and unlikely to be earned incentives, right? You hear these terms a lot. Anything that's likely to be earned or whatever, that counts toward the bonus money that gets deferred. It's not toward the cap number for that season, right? So, unlikely to be earned basically means, oh, we'll give you $1 million if you reach 1,000 yards, Naheem Hines, right? Like, not going to happen, right? So very unlikely to be earned. It basically is subtracting that from his salary now. But the player would have to agree to that, and those are much rarer, right? So when you're talking with those initial ones, guys like Josh Allen, maybe Stephon Diggs, certainly Deion Dawkins will fall into that category this year because he's one of the higher cap hits.
Right. He already has 2 void
guys,
years.
right.
Not next year, but the 2 years after are void. He's set to make 16 million this year.
Yes. So that's a case where you could extend, right? And then you have, again, the second scenario that I talked about of the 3 was just contract extensions. If somebody's due 10 million this year, you give them a new 4-year contract bonus. It spreads it out, right? So there are guys like, Spencer Brown and guys who have 1 year left on their contract that you could do that type of deal with and spread that money out over the remainder of that contract. So Bean is going to get creative, basically. He's going to get very creative. But the top money guys that we have are certainly going to get those reworks. No question about it. That's the easiest place to start, right? Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Deion Dawkins.
I was going to ask you, like, who's the top candidate? So we talked about Diggs and Allen. I mean, Trey White's got to be in the conversation, I would assume.
Well, Trey White, they have to figure out what's going to happen there. Yeah, because that's a more touchy one, right? He's coming off the 2 injuries. They could outright cut him. I believe it saves something like 6 million, but then you have 10 million in dead cap. So while you free 6 million, you got 10 that you can't use. It's dead cap, right?
Basically, you can use it next year, though.
Right.
In the other case, you would have to pay him. Right. Who else is another candidate? Anybody else you've heard that could be a restructure candidate?
I mean, there's plenty. I mean, you could go through the whole roster and really say, other than guys who are on their rookie deals before year 3, right? So like James Cook cannot get a new deal yet, right? He's got to be after year 3. So, I'm trying to think of one off the top. Greg Rousseau, right? Same type of deal with Greg Rousseau they did with Ed Oliver last year, right? Ed Oliver, they gave him a contract extension, 15 million per. Now that looks like an absolute steal for what value he brought last season, at least if he continues at that level, and the contracts that have been signed by defensive linemen since then, interior defensive linemen. If they do that same thing with a Greg Rousseau, his salary cap for this year would be then spread out over however many years they give him. It probably wouldn't affect it as much this year for that, but in the future it would for that contract. But yeah, extensions, every single contract is going to be looked at to see if they can squeeze something out of it, right? They do this during the year a lot when they desperately need a few extra. They'll go to somebody who's only got a $5 million salary. You're like, oh, he's only a $5 million cap hit. Why would you rework that? Well, if we can free up another $2 million to sign Linval Joseph,
right.
Then you do it, right? So you have to do what you got to do there. So every player is going to be looked at, but when you're talking about those big money contracts, those are almost guaranteed to be the starting point of this needs to be reworked, right?
Right, that makes tons of sense because somehow you got to get to, you got to first flip 50 million in the hole, and then I think the Bills got to be, I don't want to say shoppers, but bargain bin shoppers, right?
Correct.
Because there's a lot of needs. It seems like there's going to be a lot of needs this year compared to other years, which we're going to get into tonight. But yeah, I think even Brandon Beane said it, bargain bin type deals. It's really worked for them the past number of seasons due to really Josh Allen's emergence, right? The offense playing really well, and then people stepping up. Good draft picks, good development. Right, you get 6-round picks to start at cornerback. That's really paid off for the Bills. So being able to backfill the roster with kind of these bargain bin free agents has worked for
Certainly.
them. Right,
Yeah.
they've been
And it's going to be the
successful
same
for
thing.
sure.
And that's how they're going to do it again this year with the positions in need that we have with the guys that are leaving. I mean, defensive line is going bare, right? Basically. So you're going to have multiple signings of the defensive line, but it's not going to be top-notch free agents that are coming in. It's going to be the next Leonard Floyd, right? The next guys coming in who need a chance or who are toward the end of the career and willing to sign with a team that's a contender to try and win a championship, right? So those are the type of guys that Buffalo is going to attract, and for obvious reason, right? Both salary cap friendly for the team and for the player who either wants to win a championship or wants to prove that they've earned a bigger contract, which I think there are a few guys on the Bills this year, like Leonard Floyd, who probably will end up in that situation.
Right. And then the Bills have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 draft picks this year.
I thought it was 10. 10? 10 by my count. Maybe it might be.
Yeah, I thought it was 10.
Is that including the third one, the third round pick we traded for Rasul Douglas, but then we got back a 5th. So I know we traded one, but I think it's still 10.
Yeah, this is updated. Let's see here. Pro Football Network, December 3rd. That would have been after the Rasul Douglas trade.
Yeah,
right?
and
I
obviously
they do have a third. It is a compensatory pick, right? Or compensation pick.
So we traded one. We traded one of our thirds. I don't even remember which one in the Rasul Douglas trade, but we got back a 5th. So technically we didn't lose a draft pick there.
Yeah, it's a crazy move. Well, this is saying 9.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's either 9 or 10. Yeah.
Yeah, so 9 or 10. So anyway, can fill a lot of needs with that. Really, the Bills have drafted well past number of seasons, right? Really a credit to the coaching staff being able to develop players, get them up to speed in the system. So yeah, I think those 9 draft picks are highly important as well. All right, but let's get into it. We got all the positions listed here. I'm going to jump in and let's just start with quarterback. We're going to hit every position and is it a need for the Bills? Is it a big need? And kind of dive into the roster a little bit and see what should we be looking at in free agency? What should we be looking at in the draft? And I think it might surprise some people when you do a deep dive into the roster, right? Obviously, everyone thinks receiver out the gate, but I think when you get to these other positions, I think there's some pretty big holes in certain positions. But starting with quarterback, look, we know Josh Allen's a starter. Do we need to upgrade from Kyle Allen is the big question.
Yeah, I mean, there's potential to upgrade there if the Bills can sign somebody cheap. Is there a need to? And especially, like you said, if we're gauging other needs right now, if I'm Brandon Beane, I say just sign Kyle Allen to another minimum deal and move on, right? Like, okay, he's here for another year. Hopefully that means he'll improve. The communication is improved. He knows the system now, all of that good stuff. Just sign him for that minimum deal. I don't think he's going to warrant anything major on the free agency market. Whereas if you are truly looking to upgrade from him, which, I don't really know what that means in terms of backup quarterback. Most of those guys are still vying to be starting quarterbacks. Yes. Jameis Winston? I mean, what are you looking for here, right? So
somebody mentioned Mitch Trubisky. Would you bring Mitch Trubisky back?
No, I don't think that would be worth it, unless again, he's willing to take a minimum deal and Kyle Allen's like, you know what, I want to move on to something else. At that point, you leave it up to Josh, I'd say, right? Like, okay, you've played with both of these guys. Who do you want holding your clipboard? Like which one of these guys should be the number 2? And I know he and Kyle Allen are really close. And again, with the changes that the Bills have had at offensive coordinator and everything, and having somebody who's been through that and is there, might as well keep that guy on, let him continue to grow and learn the system along with everybody, and have that continuity moving forward. Now, if an opportunity comes up and you can sign somebody who has a little more or better starting experience as your backup, great, then make that move. So this one isn't necessarily pressing, but I think it's an easy one to just check the box, right? Okay, we've got our backup, moving on, because every
Yeah.
team you'd like to have a viable backup who can start and has starting experience.
Right. That's what I was going to get at is if Josh goes down, please,
You're
Lord,
in
forgive
more
me
trouble.
for saying it. But do you want somebody who can actually win some games? I mean, there is a handful of backups. We saw them in Cincinnati, right? The backup quarterback won some games for them. They ended up coming up short. But
a couple of teams
I feel like last year, if our quarterback goes down, we're not winning games.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can't expect to win much, right? Like, I mean, any team with a backup, but I think that's when you would start to assess. There's always going to be guys lurking, right? Some quarterback is going to be ready. Look at Joe Flacco, right? He came in and carried the Browns into the playoffs, did what he had to, didn't play overly impressive in my mind. It's not like they were winning because he was playing out of his shoes. No, they had a really good defense. So with this team, I think it's a similar thing where if you find yourself in that situation, you look at the free agency, you look at the guys still out there and say, who can we bring in? Who can we call up that is game ready, that can do this, right? And for our team, the way we want to play it. And no specific name comes to mind now, but for years, it was always everybody saying Cam Newton, right? Oh, he has a relationship with Sean McDermott, bring in Cam Newton as the backup or whatever. Now, I think there isn't really a name in the free agent market for quarterbacks that's jumping out at me. I mean, a guy like Gardner Minshew has experience, great, but he has a ceiling. Is he any better than Kyle Allen? I don't know. So,
but really, and even please, Lord, forgive me for mentioning Josh Allen going down. But do you really want the storybook season anyway? Let's say they bring in a Joe Flacco and he could throw in for 400 yards a game. Bills get to the Super Bowl with a backup. I just feel like that would be kind of bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it kind of happened to Philadelphia where their starting quarterback went down.
Sure.
And Nick Foles kind of took him to the Super Bowl. And then, it was always that conversation, right? You just don't want that. To me, I don't want that.
I don't think anybody's going to be having that conversation.
We all love Josh Allen. You just don't want to see another quarterback take him.
No,
I'd rather just waste the season
in my mind,
the season, and we'll try again next year.
But even in my mind, say he's down for, again, knock on wood. What happens if he goes down
Please,
week
Lord,
6,
forgive us.
right? And he's out for 8 weeks. Well, that'll bring him into the playoffs. He'll be back for the playoffs. Josh Allen would. But you need a quarterback now who can maintain you getting to the playoffs. And that's when I think they would assess the situation and say, is Kyle Allen going to be able to do that for us? If no, then we already have backup plan in place with our first call is going to be to free agent so-and-so who could come in here and do a little better for us.
Future
free agent. It's not going to be, it's not like it's going to be a huge leap, right? Yeah. It's going to be a tiny leap from even Kyle Allen to the next guy. But still you have that conversation.
So ultimately, you bring back Kyle Allen or someone similar to that who really just needs to do Josh's dishes, make sure he takes his notes, right? Things like that. Somebody who could help our quarterback prepare, right?
Exactly.
So there is no more conversation in that for that.
Exactly.
Right? It's just not a need, period. Next. All right, running back.
Right.
Yeah. This one's kind of interesting. I mean, James Cook really showed that he can carry the load, right? There is some things he can't do. Like he's not a pounding guy. 3rd and 1, I don't think James Cook's the best guy out there to get the ball on 3rd and 1 and goal line or whatever. But definitely a lot to like with James Cook. We don't need to talk about him, right? I thought Ty Johnson had a great season.
Yeah.
But he's a free agent at this point. We have to have the conversation around Nyheim Hines, right? He got hurt last year. He's under contract for $5.4 million this year. Will he be the same player? Big question mark, right? Torn ACL, had the surgery. We've seen players come back from that, and he did have the full year off, which I think was good, right? He's had ample time to heal. But we've also seen players who are never the same, right? He's kind of an explosive guy, another receiving back. He's punt returner, kick returner type. Will that explosion still be there, right? That's a big conversation. We have to pay attention to. But the free agents they brought in last year, Damian Harris, Latavius Murray, Ty Johnson, all free agents again. So do we have a need here at running back?
Well, physically, yes, they have to sign somebody, right? Again, so just like quarterback, yes, you need somebody, obviously, to be your backup. At running back, it's a similar situation. You nailed it when you said, we're good at one. We know James Cook is the one. I'd love to have Ty Johnson back if they can make that happen. But he did show flashes, so maybe another team is gonna pay him. They have to rework Nyheim Hines. Now, that might mean just outright cutting him and moving on. But assuming they bring him back because he is under contract, they will change that contract, but he is under contract. He's more of your number 3 and your return guy, right? Change of pace, number 3, can catch the ball, can speed if he still has that, right? So without a doubt, the biggest need here is that bowling ball back. You need somebody to be the power back who can crash it up the middle when you need it at the goal line or for short yardage. Latavius Murray did well with that early in the season, but we saw, he's up there in age. He's kind of grinding down. So I do think that is the hole. And I don't think that makes it a priority, though, right? You find that guy and you pay him, again, minimal salary to come in and do the job. Or you draft a guy late in the rounds or sign an undrafted free agent who can be that guy for you, who fits that need, right? So it's a very niche thing. I think you need it on your team, but how they fill it is low on the priority list, right? I don't think you spend, and I don't think you go out and find a running back who's, we're not signing Derrick Henry to be that guy, right? That's for sure.
Right,
so
right.
I don't think there's any free agent, that's jumping out at me that will fill that role, but
Right.
they will find somebody to be that guy.
Right. You need that third and short guy that's, second and 2, just kind of that ground and pound type running back. I feel like they don't have that on the roster right now. Nyheim Hines, another guy who can catch out of the backfield. He's an explosive player. He was an explosive player, but again, he's not the ground and pound type, right? And I thought Latavius Murray did a good job in that role. Ty Johnson, we saw him do that on a number of occasions, and obviously Josh Allen does it most of the time. But I feel like a guy like maybe A.J. Dillon is someone to look at, right? Just
Somebody's
huge
going to
guy.
pay him, though.
Well,
yeah,
his
right.
market value, according to Spot Track, is $3.5 million.
Yeah, I don't think we spend that much on a third power back, right? So I don't think they go even that high. I think it's minimal, $1.5, $2 million
Right.
for somebody.
He might be
like
too
that.
big. That might be too high, but that type of player.
I do like that comparison, though. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Somebody who, if maybe he doesn't get paid.
Yeah, maybe he ends up there.
I don't think the draft class for running backs really deep this year. There's a handful of guys right in the second, third round, but you're not hearing a lot of buzz about running back in the draft. So, I mean, more free agents probably get signed this year compared to other years, right? If they had a deep draft class. So, but yeah, they definitely need that. Somebody who can take it off, Josh. Look, defenses they know Josh Allen's going to sneak it in fourth and short. The tush push has been talked about. Maybe they'll make that an illegal play. A lot of things could change. So I think that's definitely something to keep an eye on. Ground and pound type running back would be a need.
Definitely. Yeah.
Let's get into receiver. This one, I think most people think is the biggest need right out the gate.
Yes.
For a number of reasons. And, a few of those are, look, there's a lot of conversation, a lot of rumors about Stephon Diggs getting traded. Are they true? We don't know. You don't really know unless you're in the building, right? Gabe Davis is gone. I don't think anybody, I haven't heard anyone say we should re-sign Gabe Davis. I think there's a mutual agreement there that says, hey, look, you did good for us, and you've earned yourself a bigger contract that we simply can't pay.
Yep.
Right. And I think that's been the understanding throughout. Now, if some crazy thing happens, it is a deep receiver class in the draft. So maybe he doesn't get the big contract, comes back. I think the Bills would consider it in that case, but I think that's very unlikely. I think some team out there will take a shot on Gabe Davis. So he gone. The number of other players, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Deontay Hardy's coming back. He'll be on the roster next year.
As of right now,
as long as they don't release him, for his contract, he's scheduled to make 5.5.
He's under contract. Yes.
KJ Hamler is somebody they signed to a futures deal. Which I just don't think you're going to get anything, right? He just had the worst luck possible. I from looking at his history, I just don't think it's something that's going to change, right?
Sure, that's just a flyer you take on a guy. You hope he's healthy, and maybe if somebody gets injured, he could come in later in the season and be that guy. But I don't know at this point that you could rely on a guy like KJ Hamler.
I loved him coming out, right? Like,
he's got
everyone
talent.
did. He's a second-round pick in 2020 by the Broncos. Showed a lot of flashes coming out of college, but hamstring injury his rookie year, torn ACL in 2021, and week 3.
Everything under the
2022
sun.
hamstring injury, torn pectoral muscle, and then he had a heart issue. His heart's inflamed, right? So they released him due to a non-football
Medical.
related
Mhm,
injury, and then gets signed to the Colts practice squad, and then they did not re-sign him, which is kind of telling, right? Because I think that's a
Yeah.
team that actually needs receivers. So I think he'll be here for camp, but I just don't see him making the team. So
Yeah.
can't really rely on that. And then we have the Justin Shorter conversation. You know, I think he was really going to be a special teams type player. Was
Right.
kind of the plan.
Maybe. And obviously he had the injury that kept him out all year, which was nice because it's almost like redshirting him for a year, right? You didn't have to
also
cut
a
him
5-year
on the
college player.
roster.
So
Yeah, and now it's,
yeah.
I don't know again that it'd be great. He's great to have around. That's competition. He's been around. He knows the system. Everybody's going to be better in year 2. We're going to know this offseason what he could potentially be for the Bills, but the expectation is not there for him to come in and all of a sudden be the number 2, at least not for me. I mean, there are some people who might think he could be on the active roster, but that's not my expectation for him at this point. He could be on the roster. I don't think he'll be a contributor at wide receiver. I think it will be more as a special teams or,
Might have a couple
6th wide
packages.
receiver. Yeah, right.
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 But for the people who are on the Keon Coleman train, you kind of have that skill set already in Justin Shorter, right? He's just bigger than most receivers. I think he's like 220 or 230. Sure. He's 6'5". I mean, he's a guy that can, out muscle a player to catch a football, right? A 50-50 ball. So it's nice to know they have that type of receiver on the roster. But again, how many times are you going to dial up a play like that? I just don't see a lot, right? And I think Justin Shorter actually can run routes pretty well, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I think Keon Coleman needs to work on that. So if you're comparing the two, Shorter might have the edge. I mean,
you're talking about like Shorter, who was like a 5th round versus Coleman, who's expected to go in the 1st round. Obviously, Coleman is
could grow into something much better. But if we're talking next year only, right? It's more level.
Sure. And the Bills do, right. So the other ones are written in white on the screen for YouTube. This is written in white to 2024. It should be in red, right? Because this is by far the biggest need for this team. And, although Justin Shorter is a good piece to have around, he's not going to be the answer we need, right? It's not going to be a big enough upgrade. And in my mind, right now, at least, I don't feel Keon Coleman will be either. We need an impactful number 2 wide receiver, right? Somebody with good hands to take the role of Gabe Davis and take it another step, right? Have the hands, have the big playability. And there are guys in this draft that I really like and really think could do that. And we've already talked about free agency not having the salary cap money. There are guys on the free agent market. Wide receiver is one of the hottest this offseason free agent markets. I mean, all the guys at the top, you're talking Mike Evans, Odell Beckham, Tyler Boyd, the other receiver in Cincinnati. Yeah, sure. But it's going to be T. Higgins. Thank you. It's going to,
I believe.
Did he get the tag already? Yeah. Oh, I didn't see that. So there's guys whose names are out there at wide receiver, and it's going to be guys getting top dollar, right? Market deals, $25 million a year. But that's not where the Bills are shopping right now, right? You have got to find a bargain bin guy. So draft is must. I think number 1, you've heard me say it before, the Bills are picking a wide receiver in round 1. I don't care what anybody tells you. The Bills are picking a wide receiver in round 1. I'm confident in that. I don't care how many people tell you, well, they could do this and they could do that and they're prepared for this. Certainly they're doing their due diligence and they're prepping for any scenario. But I'm telling you that I firmly believe the Bills will trade up if necessary to take a wide receiver if there starts a run, because they're going to have at least 3 guys that they're looking at that they want, and they will still be there. If names are coming off, they will find a way to go up and make it happen. Obviously, you need a team to trade up with. So if nobody wants to trade up, you can't do that. And then you got to have a backup plan. But I'm confident the Bills will take a wide receiver in round 1, but that doesn't fill all of the needs. I think you double dip. You either go round 1 and round 2, or round 1 and round 3 to get 2 guys who can compete for that role, because they're not a guarantee. It's not 100% that they're going to be able to contribute the way you need a number 2. Or you go out and you find a bargain bin wide receiver who, same scenarios that we've been talking about already. a veteran who needs a bounce back year to say, I'll sign for cheap, I'll come in and I'll bounce back and then I'll get my $20 million a year. Or a veteran who is toward the end of their career that says, you know what, I've only got a few years left. I'll come to Buffalo. I'll win a championship. I'll mentor the young guy coming in, right? And in this case, I think there are names on that free agent market that attract me, especially you and I have talked about this before. DJ Chark is the one that I've been eyeing because when you look at the skill set that the Bills are looking for, a number two who can make plays down the field, who has sure hands, who runs good routes, he fits that system, that description very well. Now, he may end up getting $10 million a year from some team that's like, you know what, we'll give you 2 years, $20 million or whatever. I don't think the Bills will give him that much, but the Bills might be willing to do $6 million. Okay, come in, we'll give you $6 million for 1 year. It's a prove it deal. Let's see what you do in this system. We'll have you as our number two. We'll draft a guy to be right there competing with you and get those snaps. And, it works out. He has a great year. Next year, he signs for $20 million again because he's still fairly young. He's not toward the end. He's looking for another contract. That's my target right now. Of the guys on that list, I've circled and highlighted DJ Chark's name as somebody who could potentially fit the Bills. Now, he had a terrible season in Carolina, and it might just be that he's lost his talent. He's out of it. He's, whatever, and nobody wants to pay him for that. And the Bills aren't really looking at him. But I firmly believe, based on what he did before this season, and we know how miserable that Carolina offense was overall, that he still has it, and he's trying to find, he needs that rebound year, right? I don't think anybody is going to pay him based on last year, which is why he needs that rebound year, and I think the Bills would be a good fit for what he needs and what we need.
Yeah, I'm not completely sold that receiver is the biggest need for the Bills. Now, it changes if there is fire where there's smoke with Stephon Diggs, right? If the stuff we're hearing, he wants to be traded, like for real, maybe not right away, but at some point. I mean, he's under contract till 2028. So, I mean, if Stephon Diggs is going to be on the move from now until 2028, I think that need for receiver in the first round goes way up. But if we're just talking next season, or let's say the next few seasons, and we think Diggs will be here, then I think the need goes way down. Khalil Shakir showed a lot. He plays out of the slot.
He plays out
another
of the
guy
slot.
who's playing out of the F tight end position.
Absolutely, Kincaid's a beast.
Right, but that slot's it's
we need a number
down,
two.
right?
You need a wide.
You need a number two. You need
Diggs X.
You need an outside X receiver is what you need.
Yeah. So who's going to do that?
But I mean, I think you can get a receiver good as Gabe Davis who can win one-on-one, maybe a little more route tree, right, than Gabe Davis had. I think that was the big knock on him. He just didn't have the route ability to win one-on-one. You can find that in round 2 and 3 in this draft because it's so deep and there's tons of X receivers.
So you're saying just find one guy. Just find a guy, any guy, this draft. And that'll do it for you.
Well, I think you combine that with what you're saying, DJ Chark. There's some other.
So you still say, I see. So you're still on board with sign
I'm just saying
veteran.
We don't need to sell the farm to go get a receiver this year.
Right. Okay.
I don't think it's the biggest need on the team. I don't.
I'm curious to know what you think the biggest need is because you're wrong. Wide receiver is the biggest need on this team. Because we need to sign a veteran and draft a guy. Sign a veteran and draft a guy to me is a must. That minimally sign a veteran and draft 2 guys would be ideal for wide receiver right now.
Because this class is so deep, you can do that round 2, round 3, round 4.
Then I would be fine. If you sign a veteran and you sign a guy and 2 and 4, let's say you pick wide receiver. Great. I'm okay with that. You signed a veteran. You've got 2 guys that you like enough that are on board, but I don't think that's what's happening here. I think we need impactful guy, young, under contract. So you're going to take him in the first round, and it's going to be one of those guys who deserves to go there, right, this year. So there's a lot of names being floated around, a lot of guys I like, but regardless, you still need that veteran behind him. To me, that makes this by far the biggest position of need for the Bills. We're building on offense. I know we have lots of holes on defense to fill, but I don't care about those, and we're going to get to those because I'm sick of building on defense. Those don't matter. Sign Joe Hobo from the street, put him in there, fill the hole, give up 30 points a game, and have it not matter because you have Josh Allen and everybody under the sun who can help him score 40 a game because that's the way this team should be rolling right now.
But
like
the
you said,
problem
we've
is,
already got those pieces in play. You've got Diggs, you've got Kincaid, you've got Knox.
right.
Now double down and go even more on the wide receiver position, which Josh Allen has never had, outside of Gabe Davis and Diggs. Now I want to upgrade from that by going Diggs and number 1 receiver in the draft, right? And veteran who can fill a hole, similar to John Brown did for the Bills for a couple of years.
We haven't got to like the gadget player. Like I like Laviska Shenault as well. I think he's somebody to keep an eye on. Might get paid, might be out of the Bills' range, but somebody who can help out gadget plays, get some yards after catch on easy throws. Yeah. But anyway, back to your point. The Bills score 40. The problem has been Kansas City scores 41. And they just won the Super Bowl based on defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're built differently, man. But you've got to play your game too, right? You've got to have your strategy no matter who it is you're playing against. The Chiefs are in an ideal situation. They just won the Super Bowl and they've got cap money and they've got a lot to do. That we're not in that situation. So you have to do it your way. And I think the way is we want to be the team who can score more points than anyone, because I don't care who the Chiefs get. Their offense isn't going to be better than the Bills with what we just described, a veteran wide receiver 2 and a rookie that you bring in from the first round and somebody else on that roster. It's going to be deep in the pass catching, which will open things for the run game too. And we already talked about signing another running back. So I think, again, ultimately, wide receiver to me is the flashing, glaring, biggest team need when you're talking about upgrade and what it means to the team.
Sure.
Because you could talk about need. Again, defensive lineman is naked, basically.
Yeah.
We need like 5 defensive linemen, but that doesn't mean I consider that the biggest need for this team. Wide receiver is.
But again, you have the luxury of the stars aligning, and there's so many outside X receivers that maybe out the gate won't be an upgrade from Gabe Davis, but definitely could be, right? The second round's loaded with receiver talent this year.
You nailed it. You said could, and we're not in the business of could anymore. Okay, could was why you drafted a 5th round. Could is why you took this guy in the 5th round or that guy in the 4th round. Could is all those guys that didn't work. Now we're in the business of need to, which is why you double down and you either draft and sign a veteran who you think is really the answer, or you sign a veteran who's at the end for minimal, and 2, you draft, right? So it's not a matter of could anymore. It's a matter of must. And that's why I think you figure it out the right way. I don't care how many X guys there are. You pick those top 3 guys and you land one of those top 3 guys within reason. You're not getting Marvin Harrison Jr. So that's why I say they're going to have 3 guys. They're going to have 3 guys who they love, that they think are first round talents, that they need to get one of them. That's how I look at it. Absolutely. Have to come away with it.
I just don't think it moves the needle as much. There's only one ball. I think Kincaid's going to get more targets next year. Shakir's earned more targets next year.
Absolutely.
Still have Knox. Still have James Cook emerging. I mean, a number 1 top receiver, if it falls to you, great. But I don't think trading up in this year's class is something you have to do, really. I don't.
I'm not talking about trading up 10 spots. I mean, 3, 4, wherever it happens to be, similar to what he's done in the past couple of years with these types of things.
Yeah.
We'll see.
But you're right, though. You do have the opportunity to take this offense to a new level. If you do hit on the draft at receiver early, because it is such a deep class and there's some really good players in round 1. But again, for me, it comes down to is Diggs going to be here till 2028? That's the big question. And nobody knows that unless you're in the building, right?
Exactly. And without a doubt, I mean, you saw his play was not as impactful in the second half of last year. Not that he, degraded as a player, but that's going to happen eventually. And he's not going to live up to that contract. Right. That's where you're going to have.
You're drafting somebody to replace him 3 to 4 years down the road, right?
Yes, you need it now.
Yeah, that's a good point. The problem is we have more needs. Let's get into them. All right, tight end, pretty good, right?
Yeah, this one we can pretty much check and move on. I mean, we've got 5 or 6 guys on the roster right now that are playable.
The only question is Quentin Morris, exclusive free agent right now, exclusive rights free agent.
Yeah,
he's been good for the Bills, right?
He has been. Yeah, excellent number 3. Yep.
Yeah,
He's gotten a few touchdowns over the years. Yeah, and been there for the the blocking, the extra tight end sets. We'll see what happens there.
We'll see what happens.
But you have
I don't think
you have Kincaid. You've got
if
other
you don't
guys
resign
there.
him, fine. No, there's no need really, right? You're going to find a third tight end somewhere if it's not Gilliam. All right, O-line, surprisingly, O-line's really, it's locked down this year.
Hey,
right?
We got the best O-line play ever last year, and now we're going with a word that is foreign to Bills fans when it comes to O-line, continuity, right? We've got 5 guys who are coming back to play on the offensive line. That is miraculous.
And not to mention all the depth coming back. The only player who's a free agent is David Edwards.
Correct, yeah.
Again,
yeah.
so you have basically one need there. If you want to look ahead...
That's a huge impact, though. You're talking about the guy who was the 6th guy who came in for those, heavy sets where the Bills really like to play around with the run game and the, pass plays that happen in those scenarios. So he got a lot of action in good action this past year. So we need that role. It's just a matter of whether it's going to be him or not. And I'm not stressing over that one for sure.
Not a huge need there. If you do want to look ahead some, Deion Dawkins, Mitch Morris in their final year next year.
Stenner is the position. I think Mitch Morris, now you're starting to look at what happens for the future. But they could end up reworking and re-signing him for another year or two. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, definitely interesting, but not a huge need at all anywhere on the offensive line this upcoming year. Defensive tackle, right? To me, this is the biggest need.
Now we're getting into it.
We're going to spend some time on this one. Ed Oliver right now, the only viable defensive tackle on the roster. 5 defensive tackles are currently free agents. Right. And that's who it is. It's
all the guys, pretty much everybody.
Quan Jones, Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips, Poona Ford, Linville Joseph. I mean, they've been good, right? The strategy of bargain bin, getting these players in here at a low price, right?
Yeah.
They've played well for the circumstance, especially Daquan Jones. He's been very important to the defense.
Absolutely. And I think that's where you start when you're talking about re-signing. I think he's the only one that I prioritize because you saw what him and Ed Oliver next to each other could do, right? And although Daquan Jones is another year older and you could say all that,
32,
he's the one I would want. I would want to bring in just for that. I'm not overpaying him. I'm not giving him the moon, whatever. I'll give him $5 million for, 2 year, give him 2-year, $12 million deal or something and make the numbers work so that you can have it happen. I think within that range, I'm willing to do it. I want him back. The rest of them, it's more about finding, I would love to have, I don't know, Poona Ford again for minimum money, right? Or, what's his name from Washington, who we traded for. I think that could be what we need to do is do that again, right? The Bills should be looking to do that again. Who's right now a 4th defensive tackle on another team that isn't getting a lot of action, that has potential that we could maybe trade for and put him on our roster where he might not be the starter, but he's going to get a lot of reps because we know we rotate a lot on that defensive line, right? So it's going to be somebody who's going to see a lot more action than maybe they did. Tim Settle was who I was thinking of, by the way. Mm-hmm. They made that trade where Tim Settle was, you're a 4th guy on the bench over there. You weren't getting much action.
Extremely deep.
Let's bring you over
Commanders
here.
Were very deep at defensive tackle, still are, right?
So he didn't get to see much.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, right. So if we could find that again and bring in a guy cheap, who has potential to show more when given more opportunity, because again, rotation at defensive tackle, without a doubt here, you need bodies, right? And that's a big thing for Sean McDermott's defense. So although there's a lot of change going on the defensive side of the ball, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, again, we will need bodies. I'd love to keep Daquan Jones. Certainly you're looking in draft. Certainly you're looking in bargain bin. It's all of the above at this position.
For sure. But I think about what a talented defensive tackle would do for Ed Oliver, would do for, the edge players, somebody who can eat up blockers, right? Star Lotulelei did that, right? Very selfless player when Star Lotulelei was on this defense, but you create the gaps, eat up. Well, I mean, if you go back and watch it though, He'll take up 2 blockers. What's that do? Opens up a gap for the linebacker. The way Terrell Bernard's been playing, if he can get those gaps, more consistently, he's gonna turn into a superstar like Matt Milano already did, right? I think Ed Oliver getting one-on-one, he's a much more efficient player one-on-one, but when he gets doubled, it's extremely difficult, right? So I think targeting a big defensive tackle who can eat up those blockers is something they've been missing. I mean, the defense was a lot different with Daquan Jones last year than
Correct.
when he was out, right? So a talented guy, I think, you draft one early, first or second round. I think that changes this entire defense, right? This is one position that could really free up everybody on the defense, if you really think about it. Just by eating up those blockers and opening
There's
up
no
gaps.
question that this is high on the list for the Bills as well. And I agree with everything you just said. A young talent, second round sounds really nice to me. Or trade up where you need to find that guy. But how you still need to do all of the other things, right? So they are looking to draft high a defensive tackle. Whether or not that happens is going to depend on how the board falls for them, obviously. But you will need to add veteran bodies in free agency one way or another. If it's bargain bin,
for sure,
settle Poona Ford type low contract guys, or if it's Daquan Jones bringing him back to be that guy, and seeing how that contract situation works out. But all around,
I just watched doing some draft prep
approach.
And stuff. Just watching the 2 defensive tackles from Texas, Brian Murphy Jr., Javondre Sweat. I mean,
they're huge.
I feel like it would open up the front 7 for the Bills. And that position would be huge if one of these guys were added to the roster, right? Just because I think you're going to get more opportunities for Rousseau, more opportunities for the linebackers to, hit the gap, stop the run. It's a huge need for this type of defense. And they don't have anybody. 5 free agents right now. I think this becomes a glaring need for the Bills. In my opinion. All right, moving on to defensive end, edge, whatever you want to call it. I mean, basically, Leonard Floyd played edge, but he was in a defensive end role for the Bills.
Yes.
So, what we thinking
Same
here?
type of thing.
Leonard Floyd, free agent, double-digit sacks for him. Really saved the team with Von Miller taking a step back this year. Didn't see the production we wanted to see out of Rousseau. And Leonard Floyd got a ton of snaps. I think around 60% of the snaps, right? So that's a huge need with him being a free agent. We'll see what happens there. I think he'll probably get paid is my assumption. But if not, I think there's an opportunity to get him kind of at a decent price. But I mean, a 10 sack guy, I think he gets paid on the market. AJ Epinesa, he only had 2 games all year with more than 50% of the snaps. So kind of a depth rotational player, but he did have his best season as a pro. And I think he'll get paid because there's upside there. He showed a lot last year. Somebody will take a shot at him. That's probably not the Bills. And I don't think I want to pay AJ Epinesa, right? You go back, there was a time he was a top 15 guy in the draft, right? Fell in the draft the second round. Bills get him, and it just never really turned into the starter potential for Epinesa, right? So although he did have a good season last year, I just don't think it's a guy you want to pay.
I look at Epinesa as somebody I'd love to keep around, but I'm not paying him, right? If you pay him $5 million, that's enough. Like, don't go much beyond that at all. And like you said, because there are teams with needs who have lots more money than the Bills do, somebody's going to pay him $10 million, I think, at least.
Yeah, I think so.
And that's, for 3-4 years. And that's too much for the Bills to answer.
Yeah, so I think you have a need there, right? Somebody who can rotate the secondary. I mean, we're all hopeful Von Miller comes back. I fully expect him to. I mean, a player like that coming off an injury, I mean.
Yeah, since you brought it up, I mean, that was going to be my biggest point is no matter what anybody says, what the organization says, what the team says, what happens next, the Bills need Von Miller to step up because he is the guy at edge this coming season, right? Because of all the losses, because of the tight salary cap, because of his salary, you're paying him through the moon. You got to get production out of him. That needs to be the biggest upgrade. He was basically non-existent all season long. he needs to show up and be basically Leonard Floyd for this defense, what Leonard Floyd was this past year, and have an impact in one way or another on the field, not just off the field, on the field. And I feel like that's the biggest upgrade for the Bills is just that alone. Von Miller needs to step up, needs to be the player we know he was capable of being, and he was for those first 8 games as a Bill. And, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. That is the biggest hinge at this position because we know the Bills aren't signing one of these top free agents at defensive end edge.
Right.
We're not signing Epinesa beyond $10 million. We're not doing those things. So it's going to be, again, maybe another bargain veteran like a Leonard Floyd. That would be excellent. I definitely think Bean will make that signing, whether it's a week before the season or, sometime in March. They're going to find that type of guy. And then, draft is always an option here as well. You have to keep your options open for, okay, this guy fell to us in round 3. He's a good edge player. It fits our need. We really like him. Okay, we're taking him, right? And that wouldn't surprise me either because that gives you some long-term flexibility at this position in need. So I think, again, this is one where it's a unique approach because of that internal step up is the biggest thing you need to have happen, and everything else will fall into place around that.
Yeah, but I think overall the defensive line, I think we all agree, was a disappointment last year. I mean, you had your moment with Mahomes. They couldn't stop him all day, right? And that's kind of why you draft edge players high. You know you're going to play Mahomes in the playoffs.
Yep.
It's why you bring in Von Miller. It's why you give him the huge money. And it was just disappointing in the moment, right?
Yeah.
There was definitely played good all year, especially on the run late in the season. But when it came down to it, they just kind of underperformed. You'd like to see a play or two, you know what I mean? Like huge third down stop. It just wasn't enough for me when I was watching the game, right? It just felt like it was underwhelming when you go back and look at how many assets were put into the defensive line in previous years. So kind of back to the drawing board is what it feels like when you're looking at defensive tackle, defensive end. Again, big need. Wouldn't be upset if they took an edge player in round 1 or 2. Would not be upset there.
Well, you have to look at the draft
be.
quality. I definitely don't want to take. They've done that and it didn't work, right? Again, you want to do this year after year after year until you hit, fine. But I don't think that's going to help your team, right? So that's where I think the defensive tackle position is more likely that high than edge, right? If an edge falls from in the second round, maybe. If an edge falls, more likely to me in the third round, that's probably where they would target them. But again, I don't think you can invest more in that position that high, knowing what you already have invested in that position in Von Miller and some other guys, right? So is it a need? Yes. Do I think they'll be looking in the draft? Yes. And free agency and bargain bin. But definitely not the first round. I would be livid if they pick an edge in the first round. No, not doing it.
I mean, Leonard Floyd, that production, though, that's a first round talent could fill that production, like 60% of the snaps. Expected to get double-digit sacks.
You hope
it fills that need.
You hope a first-round talent does that.
You hope,
but in his first year, and
right,
you also
hope a free agent does it, right?
You can't do that. Yeah, well, a free agent at least has an established. A rookie doing that is a lot different than a free agent. You know what a free agent was and what he can be, and all of that. A rookie is a giant question mark, no matter who it is, and at the edge position especially. We can't go that route right now. We're not going to invest what could have been a wide receiver in round 1 into an edge in round 1 who doesn't end up being what we need him to be. So again, you look at Epinesa with round 2. You look at Rousseau, who's done a great job, but as in round 1, you cannot continue to do the same thing over and over again. Otherwise, you can sign up for another loss to the Chiefs if that's what you really want. So go ahead.
The problem is the draft
Brandon Bean,
it's a crapshoot.
His co-host Eric says we are perfectly okay making it and losing again to the Kansas City Chiefs because we want to do the same damn thing over and over again. No, change your approach. I don't believe they're that stupid. That's why I don't believe we're ever going to draft an edge in round 1 this year. No chance of that happening.
Well, you take best available, right? Per the need. And there's a lot of needs here.
Yeah, but there's too many.
I think you would sign up. You would sign up for Quentin Johnson last year, who ended up going to the Chargers.
Sure.
A lot of people had him as the first receiver off the board.
Sure. He wasn't in my top at that time. I was much more happy with Kincaid, for example.
Sure.
Kincaid was like a top 10 on my board.
But like if the Chargers took Kincaid, the Bills taped Quentin Johnson, you would have been pumped. Quentin Johnson was extremely, extremely disappointing last year.
He
He had a good quarterback. Justin,
certainly
Justin
situationally,
Herbert.
anything you could say. Addison was my number one guy, and friggin' look at him. Addison was who I truly wanted, and that was
decent season. I mean,
decent.
Zay Flowers,
he was the number one guy there. Come on, and working with backup quarterbacks most of the time. Wait till next year. Addison to me is the best wide receiver from that draft so far in round one. Addison.
I thought Zay Flowers.
No, Flowers is definitely an answer too. I thought
Flowers, he was the biggest difference maker. But yeah, you're right. He did have 10 touchdowns, 900 yards. He had a great season.
Addison was on fire. Yeah, Addison's the guy for me.
Both those guys would have been difference makers. But again, the point is, you just don't know. You think you know that. Okay, Troy Franklin's a phenomenal college football player. Got absolutely great speed.
I definitely like him. Yeah,
Quentin Johnson had all those things too. It's just. The NFL is extremely difficult.
That's why you double down. And you draft. You have somebody as a veteran come in. But at edge, you don't have that luxury. If you're drafting an edge in round one, they're your guy. And no matter how many veterans, they're still going to see snaps and do everything. A round one, Quentin Johnson, when you have a veteran like DJ Chark, cannot work out and still learn and be better the next year, and you're fine. That can happen at edge, which is why I don't think you can make that mistake again. You do not draft edge in round one, especially this year. It'd be one thing if they're like, look, there's 10 edge players who are phenomenal first round talents this year. That's not the case this year. So there's a lot of other guys.
5 to 8
in the first round, edge players.
I mean, if you want to count the top guys, let's see.
First round talent at edge.
There's a handful.
Maybe, yeah, but that's not in years past. That's usually one of the best. You're talking edge players going top 10. You're talking multiple edge players going top 10, top 20, whatever. This year, it's lower in the draft, right? And those guys are still. It's an offensive line, wide receiver. There's a lot of positions that are much better in this year's draft than edge, which is why I don't think edge is your answer.
The other problem, tackle's extremely deep, receivers extremely deep in this draft.
Yes.
It's almost more reason if you're stuck with, we like an edge player, we like a receiver, we like a tackle, you take the edge player because we think we can still get good value in round 2 for a receiver. We think we can get good value for tackle in round 3. So if there's scarcity in the draft or there's a class that's not as deep, you take that position, right?
No. We are not drafting edge in the first round under any circumstance. I don't care if a guy who was ranked number 12 is still there at 28. You're not picking him because you can't do that right now. You cannot. Your team. This is what I mean when people say it's best player available. There is a truth to that in a lot of ways, but it's not. It's dependent on the dynamics of the team, right? If that edge player falls, I don't care who it is, the Bills aren't picking them because this team cannot revolve around that right now. I would much rather them take a top round 2 defensive tackle late in round 1 who's still there and they like than an edge player or a wide receiver who's at the bottom of that list who's still available there than an edge player, because that will be more impactful and more of a hit, a need, a sure thing, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter.
There's no such thing as a sure thing.
Exactly. It's the draft. All of these guys are rookies.
This is why, again,
but you cannot. To me, you could have freaking Bruce Smith there and add him to this team, and he is not as big as an impact as somebody like a wide receiver who can do what a number 2 wide receiver taken in round 1 can do for this team. So that's why I'm just like, edge is not it right now for me.
Bruce Smith's 60 years old, so that's not going to happen.
Put him on the
run. But yeah, there is some good depth at edge, and again, there's no such thing as sure shot in the draft, but this is why Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane always, mention we want to get to know the person. Is this person a football player, right? A process guy, we used to call him. I think we got away from that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what you're looking for. Somebody who they think can come in and contribute, right? And it comes down to personality, it comes down to work ethic. So really, if you do have a tough decision to make between receiver and edge, but the edge player has the personality to succeed in the NFL, I think you pull the trigger. All right, let's move on. That's a bottomless pit, that one.
Disagree.
All right, linebacker.
Another position where we're
the emergence
set.
of Terrell Bernard, right? I think it's the big story. that was the big question mark last
Yep.
year. Who's going to replace Tremaine Edmonds? That certainly, I think, it's Terrell Bernard's job to lose at this point. I think they fully expect Matt Milano to come back and kind of take over, kind of do the same things he's done. Dorian Williams, I thought, showed progression throughout the season. I thought in the playoff games, especially, didn't look as confused. I thought he was playing faster later in the year.
I'm excited
which
to
is
see what he can do with a full off season.
Sure. The guy, I think he can turn into a really great tackler, right? Maybe coverage, got to work on that a little, but there's always something to work on as a rookie. Big story, though, is Terrell Dotson, a free agent, and he had a good season, kind of thrown in there from the preseason. He played a ton of snaps in the preseason, rolls right into the regular season, and guess what? With injuries, he's played a ton of snaps in the regular season too. I thought it kind of held his own, right? Kind of did what he needed to do. But definitely you'd want an upgrade from that player if you're talking starter, right? So really the question on the need is, I don't know if Dotson, maybe because he played so well, he gets an opportunity with another team, gets paid.
Yeah.
But we got to find depth, right? Because I think Dotson is a great depth player. So the need for linebacker is depth at this point.
Yes, but I think when you have, the guys at the starting position like Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard, the position itself is comfortable and then devalued. And you already have other guys who can come in, right? You have your Dorian Williams, Balin Spector on this roster, right? You don't want necessarily to have those guys as your starters, which is where the Terrell Dotson piece comes interesting, right? He did have a great season. He does love the coaching staff. He did reach his potential or whatever, his best quality so far this season. I went from saying in the preseason, I don't ever want to see Terrell Dotson on the field, to him being what? The PFF highest ranked, the other top 5 linebacker.
Yeah.
That's why rankings are bull crap, right? Because yes, he was good, but he wasn't top 5. But some team might look at that and say, now we want to be able to make this guy our starter and see what he could really do. I think they'd be crazy for doing that, but
there's certain systems I think he could
potentially get paid.
Right?
Sure. However, I could see him saying, I'm comfortable here. I play my best here. I like the coaches here. As long as they're willing to pay me something, $3 million, whatever it takes, $5 million, then maybe they keep him in. But if a team is willing to make him their starter, in my mind, he's more likely at this point, probably 70% to leave and get a better deal. But there is that chance that, I like this situation. I like this team. I want to stay and see it through. Let's find a number to make that work. Right. And that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. Like you said, go to the bargain bin, see what you can find. Not too worried about the linebacker position at this point. For a rotational depth player. Let's get the cornerback quite a bit here. Cam Lewis, Dane Jackson are free agents. Rasul Douglas came over, looked pretty good, right? Making turnovers, kind of had that cornerback position held down. So we have 2 problems to solve, and that's Trey White. Does he come back? Is he the same Trey White is the big question. Hard to tell, right? Now you're 2 seasons out of football, 2 pretty serious injuries. So that's one big question.
Yeah.
Will he be a starter, right? The other thing is Kyrie Elam, right? You just can't afford to have this guy sitting on the bench all season.
Yes, as a number 1 first round draft pick, you gotta. So I think those are 2 highly sensitive situations that are going to be approached differently in my mind. So one is Trey White. Only the Bills and Trey White right now know where he's at in terms of mentally, physically recovering, healing from those multiple injuries, right? And it has to be both of them on the same page of, yes, we feel we can do this, but without a doubt, in my mind, something's going to happen there in terms of his contract. So they're going to approach him and say, we love you, Trey, which they do. We want you to stay, which I think they do. If he's still at a level that they think can play, we need to make these numbers work, and we need to reduce this cap hit. So whether that means cutting you outright and then re-signing you to something that makes sense, or reworking
your Brandon
me, I'm going to him and saying, we're going to rework your deal and keep you here for what's under your contract now, but we need that number to come down to a reasonable thing. Because if we cut you right now, no team's giving you more than $5 million, even though you're Trey White, because of the injuries. And we love you, Trey. You know you can be your best here. We're going to still honor your contract. You have 4 years left. We'll spread it out. We'll make it work. We'll reduce your cap hit. We'll bring that number down to, I think it's like 20-ish right now, right? There's no way he's worth 20 million, right? You have to reduce that to like 12, 10, something that's more swallowable, and
like
then be able to manipulate it, and then be able to manipulate it. Yeah, exactly. And then be able to manipulate it later on. So I think that we find a way to just make it work. I don't know that means he's going to be a starter and the guy anymore, because Christian Benford, I mean, has been playing out of his shoes, right? That guy is a starter.
Yeah.
There's no question.
He's a physical corner.
Right? We were upset when he was out, right? Like we were like, oh no, this is not good. Like, and that tells you all you need to know there. And obviously, they made the trade for Rasul Douglas, and he came on and played well in this defense and played a big role in this defense as well. I still think there's room for Trey White. A lot of people are saying cut Trey White. No, we don't need him. I am not in that camp. I think for the number, you have to bring down his number. You have to make it work. You keep him in there because he's a guy who represents this team so well, who represents McDermott and Bean so well. I think that you make it work with him. You find a way, you keep him on this team, but it can't be at the number it is now, because in my mind, he's not a starter day one. He has to continue to come back from the injury, and Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford are your starters. And maybe that means cutting Trey White, saying goodbye, moving on completely, and extending Rasul Douglas and doing exactly that, making his contract work for the next couple of years. But I just don't see the team.
If you can restructure Trey White and he has to compete with Benford for the job, I mean, that's good problems to have.
Right? Oh, yes.
Both these guys are good cornerbacks in this system. Different strengths, obviously, but I mean, if Trey White's even close to what he was before, I think he would win that job outright anyways.
Yeah.
But the competition could be healthy. So you've solved the Trey White problem. How about Kyrie Elam? If you're keeping Trey White, you got to move Kyrie Elam, right?
No, actually, because he is still a rookie contract, I think that
you're just going to hold him
still
hostage.
Flexibility there. No, I mean, he's good. You want to have depth
sit the bench
and quality on the roll. But the problem is, what are you going to do? Trade him for an 8th round pick? Nobody's gonna give you anything, right?
Right. Well, the only reason you would keep him though, and not trade him for a 8th, 9th pick, is you think he can come. You think he can contribute someday?
Yes.
If that's still true,
mm-hmm.
Should we try to move Trey White then? If that's the case,
it's a tough question to ask, but I think that you still need having 4 cornerbacks is not a bad problem, right?
No,
because these guys get hurt, they rotate. You need guys who can come in. The problem you're saying is, well, we'll have 4 starting cornerbacks, and I have no problem with that. So I don't see that as a problem. And
right.
To me, the Kyrie Elam is not a problem because his is the lowest salary of those guys. Well, Christian Benford is actually probably the lowest.
Again, you have 2 1st-round cornerbacks, 2 1st-round talents sitting.
You have to. I mean, well, Trey White's is a little funky.
I mean, ultimately, draft doesn't matter, right? Where you were drafted doesn't matter.
It's the current contract.
If you're going to pay Trey White, let's say he even restructures his deal, he's still the highest paid corner. You can't have him sit in the bench. That's just how it works, in my opinion. He's not going to like that either.
So you find a way to make it work, right? Because Rasul Douglas is under contract. Now, you can cut that contract, and I believe there's no strings attached. You get all, whatever it is, $9 million back for Rasul Douglas. So if you feel like Trey White is the guy and is healthy enough, and Kyrie Elam can make that next step, then maybe that's the move. You say, Rasul Douglas, you played great here. Thank you for your service. Clean cut. We take that $9 million. We make it work for Trey White and get Elam his extra playing time that he needs to see the field. So there's multiple options here. This is the hardest one to answer right now. This is what Brandon Bean is losing sleep at night over, because it's emotional in terms of Trey White. It's value that you need to return on investment in terms of Kyrie Elam. It's Rasul Douglas, who brought you value. And to me, the craziest part of this is the 6th round guy is the one we're talking about as the cornerstone, and everything else is revolving around him. So good
Right.
on Christian Benford for being that guy, because he's the easy part of this conversation. It's really the rest that is going to play out, and it's going to hurt either way. You don't want to say goodbye to any of these guys, and it's not going to be painless regardless of who it is. But
Yeah, there's so many different
there has to be an
scenarios here,
answer.
and I think in every draft you take a cornerback, whether that's depth player or just
I don't know.
value,
Well,
right?
this
I
year
think
too,
every single draft there's going to be a cornerback coming, right? So
yeah, but we've got a few guys on the practice squad and everything too that have been of value. So I look at cornerback as a low position of need right now for the Bills.
right. Yeah, and I think Dane Jackson gets paid. I'm not sure if he comes
Sure,
back.
he moves on. I think.
Yeah. So there's who's the next person to develop or into the next Dane Jackson, right? Really, I think if they're going to find anything, it's run stopping cornerback, because that's what Dane Jackson was really good at. So I think that's very interesting. There's so many different scenarios here, which actually moves us to safety, strong safety, free safety. And there has been talk in the past of Christian Benford moving to safety, right? He's a bigger cornerback, he's a physical player. I think his draft profile when he came out of Villanova was he could be a safety or a corner. He's played really well at corner, so I don't know if they would move him. But I know when they were talking
That's
about
the problem.
Poyer, not getting re-signed.
Hey, Josh Allen
mentioned
Josh
it.
Allen's the best.
It.
Josh Allen is the best tight end in the league. Josh Allen is the best tight end in the NFL. We need to move him to tight end. That's what you're saying. Defense, cornerback is a premium position on the defense. Christian Benford is the best cornerback we have on this team. Moving him to safety is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
If Pat Mahomes was on the Bills, let's say Josh Allen and Pat Mahomes are playing quarterback for the Bills, I'm moving Josh to tight end. You're right. Because Josh Allen needs to play somewhere, right?
Scenario, Christian Benford is Pat Mahomes, not Josh Allen. It's Rasul Douglas.
Well, they're both good, right?
And
you can win with Pat Mahomes, you can win with Josh, but I mean, Pat Mahomes ain't playing tight end.
Exactly, but neither is Christian Benford, because I think that's just nuts. I know, I get it. It makes sense, on paper, but just common sense is like, that's your best cornerback, a premium position in the NFL. I don't care if you got 3 number 1 draft picks who didn't work out. You have one who did. You don't move them because the other 2 exist. No, like you continue to play him at the position he's playing well at. So I just think, and the other thing here is this, a lot of people are saying safety is the biggest need for this team. Define need, because if you're talking about bodies, yes, Hyde looks like he's going to retire. Poyer is aging. We don't know what's going to happen there, if he's going to get cut, reworked, stay with the team, whatever. Say they're both gone, and now we have nothing there except, Damar Hamlin, who might not be a quality starter yet, right? Or at least is not seen as a quality starter. Right. Rapp is a free agent as well. I don't care. To me, that's still, I don't care. People are like, you need to draft a safety high. No, we don't. You need to get the. No, we're talking about Sean freaking McDermott, okay? He can take an undrafted free agent and a bargain bin veteran and turn them into the best tandem in the league, right? Hyde and Poyer have been the best tandem in the league for many years now under Sean McDermott. Neither one of them got a huge free agent deal when they went on the market to begin with and came to the Bills. We found them, brought them in, and made it work.
But imagine what he could do with a number 1 pick, though. Somebody as talented as the kid from Minnesota.
Again, that doesn't make sense to me. Not at all. Under any circumstance does safety make sense, because Sean McDermott has the ability to turn nothing into something and make it happen.
Yeah, I agree. I actually agree with you.
I do think they sign a veteran. I think they're going to find the right free agent that they like and bring him in. And then depending on what happens with Poyer, they're going to rework that. You still need to replace Taylor Rapp. So you're going to end up either signing another guy or, drafting another guy that can fill that role, unless you think Damar Hamlin can be that kind of player. So there's options there, but it's just not a position that I'm looking at and saying, oh God, we need to do something about this, because I know that I'm confident in Sean McDermott's ability to make that happen, work with nothing and make it happen. So, and they will find something. They're so good at evaluating talent and knowing what their team needs. Now, Rapp had his, contributions to this team. And I think this was more of an audition to see if he could be the starter. Quite honestly, although he had flashes, I only want him to be in the role he was, not give him more time. You can be the third guy, and I'd be okay with that. But I don't want you being one or two in terms of the safety.
And he'll probably find an opportunity as a one.
Correct.
Somewhere
I think
else.
so. I think so.
Couple things on safety, free safety especially. It's almost turning into like safety's turning into like the running back when it comes to positional value, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty devalued. So
I mean, we saw it with our own guys, Hyde and Poyer. It's not like they went out and got big deals,
huge contracts, right? So there's
stayed.
that, right? The other problem is there's only 12 free safeties listed on Spot Track as free agents.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them's not even a free agent yet. He's Buda Baker.
Restricted?
Restricted, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's 11 options, right? So that's the pool you have to pick from. Then you have the draft, which, again, you could probably find a young player, but it's going to take time to get up to speed. So you're kind of in a weird position there, right? You have to get two, and there's just not a lot available.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, I think they could train up a rookie, somebody who's picked in the mid rounds, 3 to 6.
Exactly.
To come in and play. And if it fails, you just move Benford there.
Yes.
I mean, it's not a terrible option, really. But yeah, I think free safety, glaring hole, especially because it hasn't been a need for so long. It just kind of feels weird to start looking at free safeties right in the draft. So it'll be interesting what direction they go, because I think Micah Hyde's been so important to this defense that they may want to fill that with somebody as talented, right? And obviously you won't get that knowledge, the system and things like that, but somebody who can go sideline to sideline, not get beat deep all the time at the free safety position. So I would not be shocked if they did take a free safety early, but again, because of the positional devalue and stuff like that, I think they wait. I think they go defensive line and receiver first, and again, a lot of it depends on how the board falls, things like that.
Yeah,
really, who's available, who's in the bargain bin for free safety. I mean, that'll have a lot to do with this as well.
Right.
But this
and
position
I think this
does have me a little nervous.
This is where that move the needle situation comes in, right? I think a third round safety, even in my mind, has to be your starter, because you can get a guy in the 6th round who can be 3/4 of what that guy is, pretty much, right? So I don't. That's why the position overall is devalued, but that's why I don't see it as that pressing need, because if we don't take one in rounds 1 through 3, I'm not freaking out, even if we have nobody on the roster, right? And that's not saying that somebody else can't fill that role, right? Cam Lewis, the whatever position he is, right? They put him in everywhere. Maybe they bring in somebody like that who can be a safety, a cornerback, fill in special teams need. You draft somebody like that who can have multiple contributions on this team and be the, third safety or something, and find 2 free agents or 2 whatever bodies to be there. So it's not a big position of worry.
Right. You can even do the Tim Settle move here. Maybe a team has 2 free safeties that you think can start for your team. You make the trade for the guy who's lower on the depth chart, right?
I like that.
It's definitely available as well.
That makes sense.
Lots of options at free safety. It's harder to find, somebody who's going to change your team at defensive tackle or at edge or at receiver.
Are you paying Jeremy Chin? I mean,
I'd love to.
I would love to get him, but I would love a player like that. But again,
I think he's a strong safety, right? He's not necessarily a free safety.
Yes, I think so too. But I'm just saying, if both are a position of need, I'm assuming both are going to be empty slots. So
for sure. But it'll be interesting to see who's starting at free safety next year. First time since McDermott's been here, they've had a different player, right?
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of a scary thought, isn't it? Yeah.
All right, special teams. Don't think we need a new kicker.
Nope. Tyler Bass is under contract.
We're good at punter. I think we're still good at punter.
Punter is, I mean, neither here nor there, right? If they cut him and they sign Joe Schmo on the street, I don't care. Right?
2 more years under Sam Martin has 2 more years.
Yes, and he's done well. So I mean, I don't think you need to move on from him. Can you? Sure, but I don't think you need to. He showed enough for me in moments.
The other player, Matakevich, He's kind of a
Right,
special
free
team
agent.
linebacker.
Yeah, I don't
Free
think,
agent.
he's getting up there in age now. I think it's time to move on from him unless he stays for much cheaper. What were we paying him? $5 million to be a special teams player?
Right.
That's a lot. Now I think it's more like minimum contract, come back if you want to. No, nobody's going to pay you what you're looking for. Nobody does that anymore. Pays a linebacker to be a special teams only player. So, but you do need to fill that role, right? So that's why I was saying if you end up drafting a late round safety who can be a guy on special teams and contribute elsewhere, that's more of an ideal role for who you would get late rounds like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cheaper on special teams and younger, I think, is going to be the theme this year for the offseason for the special teams unit.
And kick returner, punt returner, right? That's not really locked down yet either. We'll see what Hines does.
Yep, he's going to be on the roster. So,
how about head coach? I'm kidding.
I like it. People will run with that one. If the Bills lose a game, the Bills are 3-1. Up, fire Sean McDermott. He's done.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's interesting about next season, if they play the Chiefs, and let's assume the Chiefs keep everybody, it's Steve Spagnuolo, 40 years NFL experience, 30 to 40 years. Andy Reid, 30 to 40 years NFL experience. Joe Brady, 1 year with 2 half years, and then Bobby Babbage, no years. So that's what you're up against, right? That's just, yeah. You better be innovative. That's all I got to say.
Right. And there is hope there. The coaching staff has definitely gotten younger, and more. You hope at least more innovative, right? That's why you go younger. You want new ideas. You want fresh guys who can come in and take things to the next level. So that's somewhat promising, especially on the defense, so that Sean McDermott can be the head coach, the true head coach, and focus on the big picture. He's still going to have influence on the defense, obviously, but still, have that big picture that a coach needs. A head coach really needs to focus on.
2024 team needs concessions. You went to a couple games this year, right?
I did. Yeah.
Do we need any more concessions?
The new stadium is coming. That's what we'll say about that.
I was pretty jealous of the Taylor Swift nachos. I don't know if you saw those. It's like a giant plate of Taylor Swift nachos.
Yeah. I
mean, we don't have those.
The new stadium is going to bring a lot of that. So I don't think you get that until 2025 when the new stadium is scheduled to be open. So yeah,
true. 2026.
That's what I mean. The 2025 off season.
Yeah, we'll do a full breakdown, the concessions, and we'll get that put out next year. But that's all I got. That's a lot of team needs this year. A lot of ways to fill them. Keep tuning in with us next week. We'll talk about free agents who we think are the good fits for the Bills. Definitely dive into receiver, look at these safeties, see what's out there for defensive tackle. And that's what we're going to be doing from now to March. We'll see who the Bills sign. We'll be there to break down every signing for the Bills. And be sure to check us out next week on Built in Buffalo. We will be doing shows on Built in Buffalo. Great network over there. Looking forward to working with everybody. It's a really exciting time for us. So.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. We've been discussing it and waiting for the right time to start doing some shows over there, and it should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it. The fan interaction, we love that sort of thing. So definitely going to be fun to have that platform and interact with everybody and work with those guys over there, and continue to put out our content because it doesn't stop with us, baby. We're talking free agency. We're going right into the draft. It's going to be a ton of fun, and I'm looking forward to it. But as always, thanks for kicking it with us.